You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions
Weekly Trek,
episode 30.
Welcome to Weekly Trek, your roundup of everything Star Trek that's happened this week. Transportation of major updates, replication of new merch, Section 31 caliber fan speculation. Whether you've been turned into a transwarp slug, or you've been sent on an important mission by your archaeology professor that revealed the origin of humanoid life, and somehow you missed out on the Trek news this week, Weekly Trek is here to catch you up. On this episode, we'll discuss NASA spots the Enterprise in space, the Trek community expresses condolences after Stan Lee passes, Mary Chieffo dances to Demi Lovato in full Klingon mode, Calypso changes Trek history, Ariana Grande shows her Trekkie side, and reviews of the Discovery Season 1 Blu-ray are out. And we'll wrap up this Weekly Trek with a review of Star Trek vs. Transformers number 2. My name is Aly Martinez, and I'm better known as a 23-year-old Trekkie. And joining me today is the ever-awesome, always amazing, John Krikorian, host of the TrekProfiles podcast. How are you doing today, John?
I am doing super-duper fantastically excited and so thrilled to be here recording Weekly Trek with you, Aly. I think we got a great bunch of news to talk about this week, and I think we're going to have a fun time.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it for 1 second. There's a lot of good stuff we got in the articles this week.
We do, including like this unbelievable UFO observation of NASA spotting the Enterprise in space. When I saw the article and I saw we were going to talk about it, I said, "What the what? We got to check this out." I was expecting to see like a full, well lit. Like TMP 7-minute, view of the Enterprise from all angles in space, that they've finally arrived from the 23rd century to come back and tell us that the future is going to be okay. And then I realized that it was merely that they saw a galaxy cluster collision through a telescope, and it vaguely kind of sort of, if you squint at it through one eye, it looks a little bit like the saucer section and the star drive section of our favorite starship.
I'll tell you what, it's funny because I bet a lot of those people at NASA, I mean, they're obviously Star Trek fans, but I'd be interested to hear how many of them were inspired to do their job, to work at NASA because of Star Trek. And then, seeing this, I'm sure it brought back some fond memories.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's proof that we see what we want to see, right? I mean, if you've ever just lain back on the grass and looked up at the sky and seen some clouds and you say, "Oh, I see a bird." And someone says, "I don't see a bird. I see a rabbit," and we see what we want to see. But it's a really cool image that they captured from the Chandra X-ray Observatory team captured through their telescope. And it just looks like a bunch of blue and purple clouds. I think it's kind of a false color image. I'm not actually sure. But, I can sort of see how they see the star drive section and the saucer section in there. I think for any Star Trek fan would be well primed to pull that association out of that picture for sure.
Yeah, I see that. And I believe in the CNET article, they say it's a mixture of X-ray, radio, and optical data, something like that. And then it's funny because this isn't in the article. They also say that it's not the first time that NASA has spotted the Enterprise. It talks about back in 2016, the Spitzer Space Telescope spotted kind of the same idea, something that looked like the Enterprise in a nebula. So, who knows how many more times we're going to see the Enterprise. And maybe someday we'll see a UFO that actually looks like the Enterprise. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I was talking to someone about Star Trek, and they had made a reference to the fact that they didn't view Star Trek as science fiction, but as future history. So maybe that's true.
Going on from there, talking about something that's maybe not so exciting, the Star Trek community has been reacting to Stan Lee's passing this past week, and Personally, the passing of Stan Lee is obviously the passing of a pop culture icon. He has had a long and illustrious career, and honestly, he really is the engine for some of our favorite comic book characters. So, coming off of that, Marvel ran a Star Trek series in the 1980s and then again in 1996. So, it just goes to show just the outpouring of love and support and just showing condolences for the passing of Stan Lee. And there's been a few times where Stan Lee has cameoed with some of our favorite Star Trek actors, especially in X-Men Last Stand with Patrick Stewart. And then also, he did also cameo in a Star Trek fan film in 2015 called Trek Isolation, A Great Responsibility. And I had actually never heard of that fan film, so I'll have to give it a watch. But many of the Trek stars expressed their condolences over social media, including George Takei, Doug Jones, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, just so many more. It's just been so heartwarming to see, and he really will be missed. I don't know how much you're into comics and stuff like that, John, but what was your reaction to the passing of Stan Lee this last week?
As you made reference to, Aly, when it comes to a guy like Stan Lee, it really was about a guy who started off in this very sort of niche comic book thing and really popularized it through not only his creative work that he did with Kirby and a lot of the other people who made those comics, but also his business acumen as well, to get these things out there and to popularize these characters with the deals that he made and everything. And I think as someone who is into just generalized pop culture fandom in a lot of ways, I think that it's something that should be recognized and appreciated, that, you know, guys like Stan Lee, he made it okay to be into this kind of stuff. Back when I was in a very little kid, you know, being a comic book kid was not a good thing. And now it's got much more of a positive place. And, you know, people are lining up to go see these films based on these things that when we were kids, or when I was a kid for sure, it wasn't regarded as something that was definitely cool. And the idea that, you know, you would go see the latest Thor film or something and come in the next day to school or work and say, yeah, I saw Thor last night, it was great. You know, when I was a kid, you would have been laughed at for that. And I think that guys like Stan Lee, and I think some of the other folks that we know from other fandoms as well, did a lot to make that something that had access to a wider group of the population, and that's something that I'll always appreciate about him. Plus, I loved all his cameos in the films. The guy was just a panic.
It truly is just the passing of an icon, and it has been so amazing to see not just celebrities express condolences, but see stories on social media of how people have said how Stan Lee has affected their lives and how he inspired them to either get involved in the comics industry, and some people have worked in the comics industry because of him. And then others saying, you know, how great it was when they met him at a convention, or actors saying just these little personal stories that they had with him. And it just truly goes to show how much of an impact that he really had on the world.
It is, and he will be missed. And while it's an unfortunate story and a sad story, we now have a super fun story, which I think is great. So let's talk about this amazing video that the talented and lovely Mary Chieffo posted, I believe it was on Twitter, of her in full Klingon regalia doing Demi Lovato. And, you know, I just want to say one thing here as a preface to this, which is whether you like Discovery or not, I just think that there's no doubt that the talent and all the people associated with the show have just embraced the fandom and are just so positive and lovely in all of their social media interactions. I think it's totally okay to say you don't like Discovery, but you have to just recognize that the people associated with it just seem like the most delightful and wonderful people in every possible way. So I had to admit, I think I watched the Demi Lovato, Mary Chieffo, Laurel video probably 5 times, giggling like a 8-year-old schoolboy who just got a second serving of cake. It was just fantastic. What did you think?
Oh, I loved it. Mary Chieffo has always been, she always posts so many fun things on social media. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram or if you're on Instagram or not, but she always posts little short videos of her lip singing a bunch of different songs, like if she's in the car or if she's just hanging out at home. And this just like took it to a whole new level, and I totally loved it. She definitely exuded the confidence from Demi Lovato's song "Confident" that she was lip singing, but she's just totally jamming and in her full Klingon garb, and she looks amazing. That outfit just, oh gosh, just like add that to my cosplay list right now. And
maybe that needs to be something that happens at STLV, right? We need to have a Klingon Demi Lovato dance off or something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I'm gonna just like add that to the list so we can make sure that happens. But in the Metro article that discusses the video itself, it also gives a little bit of a tidbit from Alex Kurtzman when he spoke to IGN, and he kind of just fills us in a little bit and talking about how L'Rell, or Mary Chieffo's character, is a female Klingon leading essentially a male-dominated race. And I'm excited to see this next season, really to see her grow as a character, and also to really step into this incredible role of being the Chancellor. And it's just, I can't wait. It's just eating away at me almost. And Mary Chieffo is such an amazing person. She's so kind and reaches out to so many people over social media, and is also so educated in the Trek universe. She knows her Trek, so I just can't wait.
Yeah, me neither. I got the chance to meet her before Discovery even went on the air, because she showed up at the STLV about, what was it? I guess it was maybe 2 months before Discovery actually went on the air, because Discovery went on in September. So it would have been that beginning of August. So I guess a month and a half before Discovery actually went on. So we had all the talent not all the talent, but a lot of the talent at that STLV that year. And so some of them were just walking around, and and we didn't know what their characters were, whether they were good guys or bad guys. We didn't know anything about them. Just here's Mary Chieffo, and she's going to play L'Rell, and she's a battle deck commander on a Klingon ship. That's all we knew. And I think we'd seen a photo or two, and that was it. So I got a chance to meet her. She was just walking around the halls, just checking stuff out, and just talking to people. And I was like, "Hey, can I get a photo?" And she was like, "Sure," and so I have a photo of me and Mary Chieffo, but before she was like in fully revealed as L'Rell. So I was well primed to like her character, because she was so delightful and just a lovely person. So thumbs up for Mary all around.
Speaking of Star Trek Discovery, we'll move on to our next article from Sci-Fi. And this article is talking about how Calypso changes Trek history. And it does make a few references to whether or not the short Trek messes with the quote-unquote canon, but I won't give away too much for those of our listeners who haven't seen Calypso yet, and I'll just go into the things that we do know or have been revealed already. And the first is that Calypso takes place 1,000 years in the future. That was revealed after the trailer included it in there. And then also we know that the computer has evolved into an AI, and the story itself comes from Michael Chabon. And it's so interesting because this article goes into the fact that some of this stuff might seem strange for a short Trek, but honestly, it's not entirely odd or has never been seen in the Star Trek universe. Especially with the whole AI computer thing, we kind of see it in episodes like original series with the Ultimate Computer. Or, I mean, you can compare the AI to Data from TNG, and the article also includes some speculation on why there's no one on the ship 1,000 years in the future, and it just kind of goes into all these little things. And did you have a chance to see the short Trek?
Of course, I watched it. I was actually traveling for work, so I was in a hotel on hotel Wi-Fi. I think I was in Nashville, or was I in Chicago? It doesn't matter. I was in a hotel on Wi-Fi, and it was fortunately fast enough for me to be able to watch it and have a relatively good experience. So yes, I watched it within moments of it being released, and rewatched it a couple times. And the only thing I want to say is Star Trek popcorn. I love it. Starfleet
Oh,
branded
good.
popcorn. It's fantastic, man. Starfleet is really like spot on with the branding. I mean, anything they can put that Delta shield on, it's like amazing. You know, they just like slap it on everything. It's crazy. But you know, seriously though, the one thing I do want to say is that I am often tempted, and this is a temptation I have to fight within myself, to sort of pretend that I need to take Star Trek canon seriously, and I know in my head intellectually it's folly. So if you're watching a show like this and you're writing down things like, okay, we know that Discovery survives, the ship cannot be destroyed from now on in all of Discovery, so nothing bad will happen to the ship because we saw it in Calypso, and we know that it exists 1,000 years in the future because that's what they told us, and so that brings it to this year in the timeline. You know, that is a mistake. That is just a complete mistake. Star Trek as a franchise has never explicitly promised or even implicitly promised to us any kind of consistency in the things that they do when it comes to the universe being internally consistent and canonical. I think that that's something that fans like to do, but I don't think it's something that the show has given us. So it would not surprise me if we're watching an episode and, you know, the Discovery blows up. You know, that it just wouldn't surprise me at all that people would be like, well, we saw it in Calypso. How can this be? Right. I think that we have to take Michael Chabon seriously when he says there are some things that are just going to be mysteries. And I don't think that they are necessarily promising us that these things will be consistent and internally consistent in a way that is continuous and canonical. They're presenting us this show, and it's more like a development platform than it is a set of strictures that they have to live around. And with more shows being made, the Lower Decks and the Picard show, there's going to be way more people involved in writing content for Star Trek. And so I think we're going to get even more into a land where, you know, well, we saw in the Picard show that this thing happened. So therefore, that means that when they saw the Enterprise J in Enterprise, that must be true. You know, it's like, no, I don't think you can go down that road at all. I think that all of these things are standalone, and I just would not expect at the end of Star Trek, you know, in 100 years or whatever it is, that you're going to be able to sit down and write a definitive timeline when these things all happen. I just don't think that that's even remotely possible. It's folly. So watch the show, enjoy the show, and if it has that sense of exploration and it's about these deeper human truths, that's Star Trek. But if you're expecting something that, you know, has sort of some internal consistent logic to it as far as story and timeline, not going to happen. So I think once you get past that, Calypso is great. And I loved it. But I really loved the Starfleet popcorn container, I just want to say. So how about you?
Oh yeah, no, I did really like it, and we talked a little bit about it on the last short trek. Shashank and I talked a little bit about it, but I think what's important about these short treks that we see, whether or not you like them, is that there are inconsistencies where it's like, okay, in Runaway, we see some as well, and I won't say outright because I know that there's some that haven't seen it yet, but there are questions where you're like, okay, well, how did that happen? Or how is that possible? And that's okay, but the story itself of the short treks is about that character that they're developing, not so much about the technical questions or about, well, how did the Discovery get 1,000 years in the future? Just all these little things where people just like to pick it apart. Because if you could go in depth on any of the series. I mean, there's people that have made canon arguments where it's like, okay, well, DS9 isn't canon either because of this, or TNG isn't canon because of this. And like you said, you can really some just get into that like minuscule thing of it where they're just looking for that little piece that makes it wrong, and then that makes you lose the whole entire point of what it was about, or the whole entire message that the short trek or the episode itself was sending. I think that, like you said, it does have that popcorn factor, and I mean, someone, either the official Star Trek or ThinkGeek or some branding needs to get on that popcorn container, because I will definitely buy one.
We are paging Mr. Jay Van Sitters, who is the Star Trek licensing guy for CBS. He needs to totally get on those popcorn containers.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
He's the guy. Well, one thing I do want to say about Discovery and about Calypso, particularly in a non-spoilery way, which is that it has a strong mythological component to it. If you want to educate yourself about that, if you're not already familiar, and that just had a very strong callback to TOS, I think, which had a lot of mythology in it. TNG and Deep Space Nine did not really, but there's a lot of mythology that was in TOS and TAS, in fact. So it was really nice to see that in Calypso as well. So that was a nice bit of, I don't want to say continuity, but I want to say honoring, I guess, some of the techniques that they used in TOS and TAS as well. So I really enjoyed that part of it. All right. And next, we have another intersection of pop culture with Star Trek. It's like someone crossed the Ghostbuster streams, and now we have Star Trek crossing with the pop culture singer, pop singer Ariana Grande, who apparently got into a little bit of a mutual admiration thing with Mark Hamill and George Takei on Twitter. Oh my goodness, all these things colliding at once in the Twitterverse. It's making my head explode. But it certainly seemed like a really nice story that Ariana Grande was getting a tip of the hat from Mark Hamill, who apparently was confused as to who she actually was for a minute until someone sorted him out. And then she gets invited to appear at an event that George Takei seemed to be shepherding, which was, I think, the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall events in New York, which is quite nice. We don't know if she's going to actually do that or not, but it was certainly nice for him to invite her. And it was just really weird to see all this pop culture icon getting into it on Twitter in a nice positive way with a lot of these sort of niche fandom type people. So I really enjoyed that article and that interaction. How about you, Aly?
Yeah, I did. First of all, I love Ariana Grande. She, her playlist or her albums are just like on repeat on my Spotify. So coming from that, also finding out that she has a little bit of a Trekkie side. And it always is fun when we see some of our favorite actors that aren't Star Trek actors or, writers or just people that we admire. And then you find out they're a Trekkie and you're like, what? No way. That's crazy. Me too. But it's just so endearing. And I love what George Takei actually commented. And he says, quote, "Her popularity is well earned. She has the voice of an angel, one that could fill the vast heavens," end quote. And I just love it because when she responds her tweets, she's just like, "I'm crying. Sulu likes my voice," like all this stuff. And that's totally how I feel like I would react to. I would just be like freaking out.
That's right. It's just a fantastic story. I really enjoyed it. And I just want to say that when I saw the George Takei tweet, I had to, of course, I heard it in my head in his voice. Yeah, and I think I just tagged on an "oh my." Do you are you familiar with the term sniglet? I don't know if this exists in pop culture anymore.
I have actually never heard that term before.
So there was a comedian, I want to say Rich Hall. I could be wrong about that. But there was a comedian who his whole bit was like, there's words that should be in the dictionary but aren't, and he called them sniglets. And he had a whole comedy thing about this. Like, what's the name for the black stuff around the rim of the ketchup bottle? Like, there should be a word for that, and like that was his bag, right? I'm sure like Google can, bring you a million of these things. There needs to be a word in the dictionary when like these really weird intersections of like people that shouldn't be talking to each other suddenly start to intersect. And like another example of this is on Twitter, and this is really like out there. Senator John McCain, who recently passed, was interacting on Twitter with Snooki from Jersey Shore, which is like mind-blowing if you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
So there needs to be a word for this phenomena when these sort of things happen, when like the streams get crossed and, craziness ensues.
Moving on to our next article, which is from Trek Movie, and this is a review of Discovery Season 1 on Blu-ray. And I will preface this by saying I did not get the Blu-ray myself, so I'm talking about this from the article standpoint. And I don't know, did you get the Blu-ray? Do you have it or not, John?
Oh yes, no, I have the Blu-rays. But I have to admit, I always have, and this isn't a criticism of Star Trek or the production in any way, but in the world of Blu-ray and DVD sets, there's always this like wave one, wave two sort of thing that we've seen even in Star Trek before, but in a lot of other films and movie sets as well. Just to give an example, when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, I went out and I got the DVDs when they first came out, and then they came out with the special extended editions. Then they came out with the special extended edition Blu-ray sets, and every incarnation had more and better stuff on it. And I feel like there's going to be the same thing here. So we got the wonderful Blu-rays for Discovery, and I feel like we got just a little bit of special content. And there's probably going to be like some other box set coming down the road, you know, in 3 or 4 years that's going to have everything this set contains, plus even more stuff. So I bought it just knowing that this is like a limited time thing, and this is going to probably find its way to eBay at some point, and I'm going to be rebuying it again. What a sucker I am. So I bought them, and I was happy to buy them, and I'm going to enjoy them. But I know full well there's going to be some special set that's going to come down the pike in a few years that I'm going to have to rebuy. So, but I got them and I will enjoy them. And one interesting thing is that this is the first time we'll be able to enjoy it in 5.1 surround, because Access apparently did not support that in first run. So, but it does now. So you either have to go back and rewatch it all on Access in 5.1 or watch the Blu-ray sets. But if you're watching it over All Access, I still think you're going to get some compression. So this is probably the best that Discovery is ever going to look, is on these Blu-ray sets, and the best it's going to sound as well. So I'm looking forward to consuming them. I have not yet, because I've been traveling for work these last couple weeks, so I've been away. But once my TiVo sort of clears out and all the new shows that come on in the fall that I've been watching, I'm going to eagerly consume this probably over Thanksgiving break and just watch it all straight through and watch all the special features and just have a great time with it.
Yeah, and I mean, just let me say that it's not. The reason I didn't get them was not because I don't like Discovery, because I do like Discovery. I honestly I kind of come from the same standpoint that you do, that I guess expected that there would be a re-release of it. And at the point where pre-orders were coming in, I was in kind of a convention hype where I was spending most of my money on collectibles and convention tickets. So, but I am interested in getting it eventually. And the Trek movie article that kind of goes in depth about the Blu-ray set itself kind of goes over just, first of all, a little bit about Discovery. And I mean, I'm sure Discovery's been out for a while, so there's no spoilers there, but kind of just goes over some of the episodes, the writing, production. But also I saw this in both the Trek movie article and I saw it on Twitter, but on the box itself, when you open it up, it has that kind of the photo or the art of all of the crew, and then Ash Tyler doesn't have any facial hair in that photo. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did not.
Okay, because I saw it on Twitter first, actually, before I read the Trek movie article. But when you open it up, like, it's the whole crew. It has like Georgiou and Burnham and etc. and Lorca, but it's just Ash Tyler with a baby face, and it just like looks so strange. I don't know why that is. I don't know why that was a choice, but I wonder maybe if we'll see him without his facial hair in season 2. But then I've also seen, like, in the Mary Chieffo dance that we were talking about, the Demi Lovato thing, Ash Tyler shows up and he's in his Discovery uniform and he does have facial hair. So
yeah, and a big one, a big full beard.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But yeah, you should take a look at that photo again and see if it's just like, wait, huh? What?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if the people who are putting the art together for the boxes and stuff like that aren't necessarily tied in to what's going on in the show. I don't know. That I'm resisting the urge to read the tea leaves too closely, because I'm just suspecting that, these people were given probably a bunch of stock art and, other things that the production just kind of sent over the transom and said, here's a bunch of art, go make the boxes. So I'm not sure that we are meant to interpret anything from that. I could be wrong, but I just, I don't know. That seems a little too in the weeds, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you there.
I do have to say though, I was a little bit disappointed that, and I haven't verified this myself, but it doesn't seem like there's any commentary tracks in the set,
Oh,
and that's one of the things I ordinarily really enjoy. So I'm surprised that there's not any writer or producer commentary tracks, at least that I've seen so far. I haven't, like I said, I haven't actually cracked open my set yet to put it in the machine, but based on what I've seen in the articles and the coverage, it doesn't look like we're getting any of that, and that's a little sad.
that is really interesting. I guess I didn't even think of that. I know in the article they say that they have a variety of special features, and I've been seeing on social media too that they have some of the special features from the premiere itself when it happened. I believe it was in San Diego. That was the premiere.
Yes,
That or LA.
and some of our friends that are in the Star Trek Los Angeles away team were in those special features. So that's great to see all of our LA Star Trek friends in the Blu-ray sets. I think that's great.
I know that also the special features include a variety of little kind of pieces. They have stuff such as like the concepts and casting of Discovery, and then also to stuff like dressing for success with Gersha Phillips, where she kind of goes over her ideas for the uniforms. And there's also some deleted scenes that I mean, we saw one at WonderCon this past year with the whole like Giorgio Section 31 stuff, but there's some other deleted scenes that I'm interested to see. So hopefully I'll either get the box set soon or hear about it from someone that already has it.
The one thing I'll say is, as I was looking at the list of deleted scenes, I was pondering, and again, this goes back to our earlier discussion, like how seriously am I supposed to take this stuff if I'm trying to, integrate all the things we're seeing in our head into just our own like head canon, because I think we're supposed to take the Giorgio Section 31 stuff completely seriously and be like, yep, that actually happened, right? Like that was a real thing. They just didn't show it to us. But some of those other deleted scenes may not be quote unquote canonical. So I don't know if we're just supposed to look at them as interesting historical artifacts or if we're trying to integrate them into the larger story that just got cut. Because I didn't understand in the Section 31 bit with Giorgio, on CBS All Access, you can have whatever running time you want. It's not like you got to cut it down for broadcast, right? Where you have to have like exactly 43 minutes of episode. You can have as much or as little as you want. So, but then they release it and tell us, yep, this actually happened. Okay, got it. So I'm not sure how seriously to take the other deleted scenes, if you get my meaning.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, we will wrap it up for the main news section of Weekly Trek, and shortly I'll be doing a review of Star Trek versus Transformers #2 with Shashank Avvaru, but we'll wrap it up with John for the news. So thank you so much for joining me on this Weekly Trek, John. It was such a pleasure to have you.
It's always a pleasure to podcast with you, Aly, and always a pleasure to do Weekly Trek. And I just enjoyed talking about this with you, and I look forward to hearing your review of Star Trek Transformers crossover. And the only other thing I want to say is Autobots transform and roll out.
Oh my gosh, that is so great. But quickly before you go, why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you and get in touch with you?
Sure. I am Trek Profiles pretty much everywhere. So that's on Twitter, where I am most active. I also am on Facebook at Trek Profiles. And of course, TrekProfiles.com, where I post all the show notes for my episodes, and you can find out how to listen to my podcast, where I do interviews with Star Trek fans about their fandom. So that's where you can find me there. And Trek Profiles on Twitter is where I'm most active, and that's my show/fandom account. And then my personal account, where sort of anything goes, is at JKinLV. So that's where you can find me. And with that, I will say, live long and prosper, y'all.
That's awesome. Well, make sure to stick around for the review of Star Trek versus Transformers #2. And if that's not your thing, I'll sign off with you with live long and prosper.
Hey, listeners, thanks for sticking around. Weren't John and Ali great on that Weekly Trek section? They're amazing. And I'm glad I get to cap it off today with this review of Star Trek versus Transformers #2 of 4, or what the creators really like to call it. If you follow Mike Johnson or Phil Murphy, they really like to call it Trekformers. So in honor of them, I'll call it Trekformers too. So Trekformers #2, mini review. What we'll do here is we'll give you in 2 or 3 short sentences a spoiler-free review of what we thought, and then you we'll tell you, hey, this is where you can leave us, and we'll give you some information as you leave, and we'll give you a 5 or 6 second break. And if you stick around, you are warned that there will be full spoilers, so there'll be a little bit of a discussion on the comic, including spoilers. So, with that, Ali, what did you think of the comic number 204 in 2 or 3 sentences without spoilers?
Okay, I really did like it. I thought it was fun. It was a quick read for me, and I think it's very reminiscent of the stories that we see in like the animated series. And I'm honestly, I'll admit now that I'm not too familiar with the whole Transformers lore, so I definitely have way more to learn about that. But they do give a little bit of background in the comic itself, kind of about the Transformers story, and I think the art is great. It totally feels like the animated series to me. So it's light, it's enjoyable, it's a good read. What about you?
Before I give you mine, what do you think on a warp not machine I'm sorry, on a warp engines broken to maximum warp, what would you give it?
Oh, are we talking like Warp
Yeah,
9 or
like a
like
number.
what? Okay. I would give it like a, I don't know, a 7, something like that. It's not that it's not good. I just think it wasn't really as in depth as some of the other Star Trek comics we see. But I don't think that would have been appropriate for this type of comic anyways. So,
And that's pretty much where I lined up to for the most part. I'd probably give it a warp 7 myself. It's a good comic. It's a perfectly good, worth your 3.99 comic. As someone who had gotten the opportunity to talk with Mike Johnson personally, and he's someone who really tries hard to make sure that people are getting the worth that they spend for their money's value. So I can say that this comic, especially with Phil Murphy's art, which continues to be the highlight of this comic, by the way. If at any point you feel like the story is not pulling you along, buy these 4 issues, at least for the sheer joy of seeing two amazing animated series come alive on paper. I'm sure if you didn't know that one person was doing the pencils, you actually would completely believe if I told you, oh, both the companies came together and they pulled up their old art and they're now doing it through technology. Like it's insane to me. So that just for that alone, make sure you buy it. But uh, in a not to get spoilery at all, but that exposition part, that background part that you're talking about, is where most of my problems lied. So for me, on a scale of engines broken to maximum warp, I would give it a warp 7. So for those of you who do not want spoilers and are really interested in going and checking it out, do buy it. We both recommend it clearly, and make sure you follow the show on at Weekly Trek on Twitter and Weekly Trek on Facebook. And if you're really so kind, if you'd like to buy some dilithium and ractogeno so we can keep doing this, consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/the tricorder transmissions. For just $1, you get access to all kinds of insane stuff that we do on here, from PoliTreks, which is a spin-off of the podcast that we do, PoliTreks, to unedited episodes, to Patreon exclusives, all kinds of fun stuff. With that, if you just do not want any spoilers, live long and prosper. Hey, and we're back. Good job for sticking around. Either you read the comic or you did not, and you live a devil may care lifestyle, which I completely endorse, and you want all of those spoilers. Let's get into the spoilers. Ali, what did you think of the comic? Now, jump in with art, plot, dialogue, everything.
okay, so first of all, I don't know if this is going to make sense at all, but I think it's funny that even though the Transformers at this point are not, they're not on the Earth, and I guess according to the story they have not been on Earth for some time, that they still, the really the first time that you see Optimus Prime, he comes out like as the semi, and versus like some, I mean that's like an Earth thing, and they say in the comic that they adapted to like the like the car or the semi, just because those were the vehicles on Earth. So I'm actually kind of surprised that they haven't adapted more of like a space, like they wouldn't be spaceships. I don't know, but I guess they've been like underground for a while, so they wouldn't really know. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Here's my biggest problem with the comic, and like I said, it's a perfectly good comic. Great job overall. That art aside, which I will admit is still, as I said earlier, the strong point of the comic. Like everything from when you see that full one-page splash of the Vulcan mind meld, where Spock mind melds with the Transformer, and Phil Murphy essentially captures the synopsis of the Transformers animated show in that one page with beautiful art, to something as simple as, for the first time I saw in a comic Kirk being afraid. Like, you remember that one panel where Kirk just looks scared while while Optimus, not Optimus Prime, the other one of the other Autobots tries to engage him, like tries to fight him, and he's like, no, we didn't kill Optimus Prime, he's fine. So that was great for me, but my biggest problem with the comic is there is about 4 or 5 pages of just exposition, just them telling the story of, like, they're in the whole comic. If I was to summarize the plot, it's the Autobots are trapped and Optimus Prime is trying to get out, while the Klingons and the Decepticons get together and they fire on the Enterprise. And it's the Enterprise trying to get out of that situation, and Kirk and Spock and company trying to do whatever they can. So, to help the Enterprise. My biggest problem is that in the midst of this like really exciting 24, 25-page story, the writers, Barber and Johnson, they take a break for about 5 pages and go, oh, let's sit down, and now I'm going to tell you how everything happened, which is
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just like for people like me that don't know it very well. Who knows?
well, I can understand that part, but why would you do that? Like in the middle of a high stakes situation like this one, right? Like that's my weirdest thing. But do you have a favorite panel from this comic?
I, gosh, now I'm gonna have to like turn back through it, but I did like the Spock like mind meld with the Transformer. It was definitely, I don't want to say tacky, but I want to say predictable, perhaps. I feel like the whole comic in general was slightly predictable. It was a story that I would have very much. I guess if I was in charge of writing a Star Trek Transformers story, this is probably along the lines of what it would look like. But honestly, it is fun also, the panel where you first see Optimus Prime come out as a semi. I mean, it's just those little like nostalgia things, but I'm coming from the stance of it where, okay, well, I've seen the Michael Bay Transformers movies, but there is so much more Transformers behind stuff like that. So I don't know how closely you followed the Transformers stuff, but is there anything, maybe setting it aside from a Star Trek comic, because essentially it is a Star Trek comic, but it also is a Transformers one. So coming from a Transformers side, did you see anything that you might look at differently versus a Star Trek
Yeah,
comic?
as someone who is a Transformers fan, and I've seen the Transformers. This is typically called like Transformers Phase 1 or Transformers Series 1. It's the 80s show that started it all, and that's what they're trying to they're emulating here. So as someone who saw that, my favorite panel, and definitely the one I'm most intrigued about, and one I'll keep in my head for a long time to come, is this one panel where the Decepticons are standing on the Klingon battlecruiser.
Oh yeah.
I finally got to see a perspective of, in the shows and the movies, you really see what the Star Trek ships look like, but you never actually get to see these real world comparisons of what size they really are, how immense they are when actually compared to real world objects. You get fleeting images of them, like in Into Darkness when it flies over San Francisco. You get to see something, and you get to see a bit of that in Yorktown and beyond. But it's really nice to see that Transformers, which in themselves are so big typically, right? And then you get to see them on a battle cruiser, and they look like like a pilot sitting in an open roof flight. Like they're tiny when compared to a spaceship. So things like that really made me happy. But yeah, overall, nothing to get too excited about with the story. It's not a Watchmen #2, or it's not V for Vendetta, where you'll sit down and go, oh, that's what this comic is trying to say about modern America and racism. It's just a fun comic about people in Star Trek uniforms fighting against big machines. So overall, I liked it. Nothing. I did not enjoy it as much as the first one. The first comic seemed like, just with the intrigue, I guess it seemed more more exciting to me. But I guess now, like, if we can speculate for a bit, there are only 2 more issues left. So is the entire story that these other Autobots are trapped, and the whole idea is to get them out and get rid of those Klingons?
I mean, I assume that the story itself would kind of wrap up as we expect that it would, like a classic. I mean, ideally, it would wrap up kind of like a classic Star Trek animated series episode where everything kind of, they figure everything out and they figure out a plan and then they make it work and then they win the day. I mean, that's what I am assuming, but they could throw it at us where maybe it doesn't end as nicely as we'd like. I don't know.
I just think if that is the goal, because these guys are still trapped down there, like that's where the story ends, is with them being, the Autobots still being trapped. And I guess of issue 3, they find out a way to get out of there. And in issue 3, if they get out of there, it'll at least take them issue 4 to fight off this new cloaked Klingon battle cruisers, which I'm sure at some point, I don't know if this was implied, but we have the Transformers now learned how to cloak, like the Decepticons? Was that the implication? Or, like, did you get that at all?
Yeah.
Or was it just...
Yeah, I remember them saying it, but I don't know if that was like, hey, well, we have that advantage, or like we're sharing that with
Right.
you.
And so I guess the big one of the big things we'll see, or one of the novel things we'll see, like the Vulcan Transformer Mind Meld, is like we'll get to see a cloaked Decepticon, or like a Klingon Transformer. But like, if that is the whole idea for a 4-issue miniseries, it's fine, but it's definitely not as expansive or as big as I thought it was going to be. But maybe my expectations were too high. So I went into this too much already. I'm so sorry. We're doing our best to keep it short, but yeah, overall it's just a decent, good comic. Just buy it for that splash and the cover and that one panel that I really liked, which is Klingon battle cruiser on which 2 Transformers are standing. So those are my overall thoughts. Well, with that, Ali, where can people find you?
I can be found primarily on Twitter with my handle being @TTrekkie. I'm also on Instagram by that same handle. My website is ttrekkie.wordpress.com. Also, you can send me an email. My email is the.ttrekkie@gmail.com. Send me an email, send me a DM, reach out, whatever you feel like.
People can find me on @gutter_hero on Twitter. That's GUTTER_HERO on Twitter. If you'd like, I also enjoy doing not really fan, that's dumb. I enjoy doing pen pal stuff. Apart from emails, I also enjoy writing actual handwritten letters. So if that's something you're into, hey, hit me up on Twitter and we'll figure something out. Anything nerdy, I would love to talk about it. Star Trek, comics, really anything. I'm sure there is some way I can find a way to sit down and nerd out with you on it. With that, thanks for joining us on this weekly trek. And now, officially, live long and prosper.